treats, like this. I use an old antique office chair as my computer chair, so I'm going to try and be as still as possible.
Nothing wrong with an old antique chair. Those things are cool, man.
Yeah, it looks like one of those like you'd see from Mad Men, like the big CEOs would have in their offices. It's a cool chair.
Oh, yeah.
It's seen better days, though. It's starting to tear a little bit, but it's still pretty cool.
All right, looks like we're live.
Everybody, we're live. Welcome to the Insane Asylum. We have Jake Fife from Fife Paranormal with us tonight. And we're going to be talking about all kinds of paranormal stuff. And first, we'd like to start out by thanking you for joining us and being on our show, Jake.
Oh, thank you for having me on. It's an honor.
So, I guess... No, go ahead, Joe. Sorry, I didn't mean to
give our viewers a little bit of background on what you do and where you're from and what got you involved?
Well, my name's Jake Fife. I just turned 20 in January, and I've been an in-the-field investigator for about 10 years now, actually a little over 10 years. And the paranormal has always been a part of my life. The earliest memory I have was about age 3, something like that, of seeing shadow figures in the hallway of a house we lived at. And when I was about 5 and 6, my favorite show on TV was the Sci-Fi Channel's Ghost Hunters with Jason and Grant, Stephen Tango, the original crew. That was my favorite show.
Oh, yeah, those guys are cool.
Oh, they were awesome. And I think we still have the VHS tapes because, where I was like in kindergarten, first grade, when I was watching that show, my bedtime was at 9 o'clock. And 9 o'clock is whenever the new episodes would come on Wednesday nights, because it would be 9 o'clock would be Ghost Hunters. And then typically after that, 10 o'clock, 10 to 11 would be new episodes of Destination Truth. So obviously I couldn't watch both of those. Mm-hmm. So I would go to sleep at 9, go to school, and someone in my family, typically one of my uncles, would tape and record the episodes onto a VHS tape. And when I got home, we'd eat dinner, I'd do my homework, and then before bed, I got to watch the episode. And I had experiences, throughout my life, but, being between the ages of 6 and 10, there's other things that's on your mind. And I would go in and out of interest in the paranormal. And about age 9, we were about to move from my house in the coal fields of West Virginia to where I'm living at now in the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia. And I started having a lot of experiences. I started seeing shadows out of the corner of my eyes. I started hearing footsteps. And there was one encounter I had, and I had come home from school. I was about 9 years old at this time. And we lived basically on top of a mountain. And there was no one around. Like half a mile was our closest neighbor, maybe a quarter of a mile. And up on our ridge, they were building a water tank. And they had the area cleared out. They had hay around it and all that stuff. So one of the things I would do every day after school is I would take, my bags and stuff to my room, toss it, wherever haphazardly. And then I would go back outside and I would play with my 2 Australian Shepherds, which for the record are the best dogs ever. I will argue people on that. But, I'd let them on the porch. We were petting with them. And I noticed something up at the water tank caught my attention. Now, mind you, at this point, I hadn't really thought of anything paranormal. I was basically out of it. And I remember looking up at the water tank, and I saw 2 figures. And the figures looked, they looked like Native American warriors is what they looked like. And one of them looked, like they had a spear or something like that. And I just remember seeing them walk around the tank and just stop and stare at me. And it's weird because they're about 50 yards up on a ridge. But you get that feeling that you're making eye contact with something you can't really see too well.
Right.
And it's like time slows down. And I just remember looking up at it like, am I imagining this? And, it just was so realistic that I didn't question the credibility of it after that initial thought. And so I was just kind of frozen. They were looking at me, I was looking at them. And then my 2 dogs, they look up and they start making the worst growling sounds I've ever heard in my life. And they actually take off running after the figures. And the figures look at the dogs as the dogs are running, snarling, growling, running full speed up this ridge. They look at the dogs, look at me. And then the main one, I guess it was the male warrior, had like the spirit. He did like a nod at me and then walked behind the water tank, and the other figure followed. And I remember at the time, like, okay, obviously there's people up there messing with me. I'm going to see them, pop out the other side because it's a clearing. You can see all around the water tank. And so I'm waiting. Nothing. I never see them pop out the other side. And my dogs, they go running around the water tank and there's nothing there. And so it was after that moment, I kind of decided, I have to know what happened. That was just too obvious of an encounter. I experienced something unexplained. And so that's when I started talking with my dad, who's been a part of the paranormal for a very long time, basically since he was young. And so I started asking questions, and, we just started talking about that. And we moved to Virginia, fall of 2009, I want to say November. And the house that we currently live in is very haunted. And so the paranormal experiences just, kept adding up after that. And I kept doing research, reading books, watching interviews with investigators, mainly Ed and Lorraine Warren. They are my heroes when it comes to the paranormal field. And I'm lucky to have met and talked to Lorraine Warren in 2013. But about age 10 is when I actually got my dad's old the old cassette recorder, and he had the adjustable mic on it and all that stuff, very old school. And I would take that outside and I would do little EVP sessions with it. And it was the coolest thing in the world to me. I never caught anything on it, but it was so cool. And then that Christmas, I got my very first voice recorder, which I still use to this day. And it's kind of been the journey ever since then of me looking for answers, helping people along the way. And, you all being paranormal investigators, that you learn something new every day that just kind of keeps the interest going. And that's where I am, 10 years later.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, you said you're 20, right?
Yep.
Okay. And this happened to you when you were around 10 years old?
Yep. 9 or 10.
9 or 10. Okay. This actually, because you have such a vivid memory of it, this was probably would be considered a traumatic experience in your life, because children who have vivid memories of things that has happened usually have a traumatic experience prior to that event that gets stuck in their heads.
Mm-hmm.
So this could be considered a traumatic experience for you.
I never really thought of looking at it that way, because, in the moment, it's one of those things you look back and it's, I look at it like that was such a cool experience. It's a cool story to tell. But in the moment, I don't remember feeling fear. I don't remember feeling, happiness. It was just kind of one of those things that it's happening and you don't really know how to process it at first.
Right.
Did you ever go back and do any research on the land or the area that water tower was at?
I have. Actually, the area had been in my family since about the 1890s. Wow. As for, Indian or Native American presences there, there's not a lot of history of their presence in that area. But the area is charged with a lot of energy, and it's not just normal energy you expect. It's like elemental type energy, and one of my theories of that location is that there are at least 2 or 3 elemental spirits running around. And so I've always wondered if maybe that was a physical manifestation of one of those entities.
That's a possibility.
Yeah. And still to this day, one of the first questions I had is, why did they show themselves to me? Why? And that's the question a lot of people have when they have a paranormal experience is why me? There's
why anybody?
Yeah.
It could be anybody, any person in particular it could have been. Another question about this too is the area that water tower or water tank was being built on. Was there any during the excavation of the land in order to like level it out or anything like that? Was there any like arrowheads or remnants of arrows or encampments or anything like that found under there?
No. There was absolutely nothing found. It's one of those areas to where there had been some history in the local town of, I can't remember what tribe, used to go through there on their way to hunting lands. I wanted to say it was a Cherokee, but it might have been another tribe. But in terms of actual settlement or hunting anything, there was no history. And to my knowledge on that property, there's never been anything found.
Okay. Well, that's another thing too that you got to be aware of as well. Is if there were any kind of historical pieces that are buried there. See, when I was a child, I'm the youngest of 7, and my parents used to actually run an egg ranch in California, and this is another thing with about my mom too. My brothers, two of my older brothers, uh, went down to the end of one of the barns and was digging up some or digging for worms because we lived near the river, so they like to fish a lot. They
Right.
wound up digging up a Native American skeleton that was buried at the end of the barn,
Holy crap.
and they brought it back up to the house. This is the story that my mother told me, and they brought it back up to the house and to show it to mom and ask her about it. And she says she freaked out on them and told them, you take that and everything you got with it and take it right back down there and put it exactly where you got it from.
Right.
That's how superstitious of the paranormal my mother was.
Oh.
I don't blame her. I would be too. Haven't you seen Poltergeist?
Well, yeah,
I'll
I've seen
never forget that
Poltergeist. I just haven't seen the new one yet.
I haven't either.
So, what other experiences have you had? You said earlier about seeing like shadow figures.
Oh yeah, shadow figures. I see shadow figures all the time. When I was 12 or 13, I think it was 13, I was actually tested by someone online. So, you can take that as you will for clairvoyancy. And I actually ended up passing all the clairvoyancy tests. And, I like to approach things skeptically with an open mind. So I'm not going to, be one of those people that says, hey, I'm clairvoyant or anything, because, for me to claim something, I have to see scientific proof. And unfortunately, psychic abilities are one of those things. It's really hard to prove scientifically. But
Yeah, they are.
yeah, but it's one of those things. It's weird. Every location that I go to, even places that don't really have a history of paranormal activity, I'll see shadow figures or, just I usually call them just figures, because I think shadow figures, shadow people, they are their own little thing. I believe shadow people in definition are their own separate, possibly interdimensional entities. So when it comes to a physical manifestation by a normal spirit that just happens to be in shadow person form, I usually just call it a figure. So, by that
Right.
definition, I see them all the time.
Well, a lot of people actually refer to the shadow people or the shadow figures as demons.
That's one theory. I don't personally believe that. I think in some cases they are, but I think in order to tell exactly what you're dealing with, there are a lot of factors that you have to know how to pick up on, such as the atmosphere, it changes, changes in the energy, changes in your body's tone, how your body suddenly changes in a physical environment, what senses become heightened, that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah, because normally a person who is clairvoyant or has the ability to sense the energies around them can tell whether it's a negative or a positive energy.
Right.
And when you're dealing with like the shadow figures or shadow people, you can tell which ones are more positive than the others or which ones are negatives. One of the places I lived at in California, see, I'm a transplant to Wisconsin. I was born and raised in California.
Mm-hmm.
One of the towns that I lived near, I lived 6 miles outside of a little town called Layton, California. And they have a river that runs through the area, a fairly good sized river. It's called the Kings River.
Yeah.
There's a park called Kingston Park there that we used to hang out at when I was a rebellious little teenager. And we'd hang out there 2-3 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
And we seen a lot of activity in that park. And there was a lot of shadow people, shadow figures. And there was one in particular that was there that was not the dark shadow, it was a white one. And the trees that were in the area where we'd see these at, the trees weren't big enough to actually hide a person behind. But this white one was able to literally get behind the tree and then poke its head out, look at you, and then get back behind the tree. And if you walked over to try and find it, you'd see that tree was not even big enough to hide you.
Right.
So that's the kind of stuff that I was dealing with when I was younger too. So, but you could tell that most of the time it was mostly as mischievous. They weren't there to harm. They were there just to play around.
Right.
Well, I know. There he is. Joe muted his mic for a second there.
That's because Tanya keeps running in and out and saying stuff, and I have to because I want air.
No, I got you.
But I was looking at I've been looking at your Facebook page and I've watched some of your videos and stuff. But
I appreciate it.
What got me curious is, you ever seen Bigfoot yet?
One time,
I saw your recent post about Bigfoot, and it's kind of like on my bucket list. We've got a small little area here in Wisconsin that, if you look at the sightings maps of where it's been sighted,
yeah,
kind of overlay it. It's all in one little area, and I want to go up there one time and just kind of do an investigation with trail cams and stuff and see what we can find. But I was just curious if you've ever seen it, because you probably have a better chance there in Virginia than we do.
Yeah, there in Virginia, you have a lot of wooded areas there, don't you?
Yeah, and there's only been my entire life, I have gone looking for Bigfoot a few times, and I've only seen him for sure once. And that was actually at the same house where I had my experience with the Native American figures. And we lived up on a ridge and, kind of surrounded almost like a peninsula. We had it was basically like a cliff, and down the cliff was a little creek, and then we had an ATV trail. And, people go up it all the time. And I remember one time the dogs were just freaking out over something. And so I ran up to the window in our living room, looked out, and I remember seeing this tall, dark figure. And, I knew what Bigfoot was at the time, because even before I was into the paranormal, I was reading books and, stuff about Bigfoot because it was just interesting to me.
Well, yeah,
and I just remember
around for a long time.
Yeah, and I just remember seeing this figure just walking up the trail, and it looked just like the Patterson-Gimlin film. With the way it walks, it's slightly hung.
Said can never be.
I'm glad you said that about the Patterson film. That's the only one out there so far that I have seen that people have not been able to truly debunk because of its age, and the fact is that if you're watching it, you can literally see the muscle movement under the hair.
Yeah, I believe the Patterson-Gimlin film. It was just weird because
female.
Yeah, I just remember seeing this figure, and it was just walking up slowly, and it was, I just remember the arms almost like drug on the ground and stuff like that. I remember my dogs were just freaking out, and at one point, as the thing is walking up the trail, now mind you, I'm up on a ridge, and so I've got a really good view of this, unobstructed. Oh, yeah. It's in the middle of a clearing, up on a trail, and I remember the thing turning around as it's walking, and just looking at my dogs, and just the coloration, it was a completely black figure, black fur, almost looked like the fur of a black bear. But I remember around the head there was some it was almost like a brownish, maybe discoloration or patterns around the face. And I remember it looked at my dogs, and as soon as it did, my dogs just whimpered, just let out this loud whimper, and they actually ran under the porch. Wow. And all the thing did was just look at him. And I remember it turned around and just kept walking up the path, and then just went into the woods. And that was it.
Their reaction, your dog's reaction to that right there is alpha.
Yeah.
They were reacting to an alpha male. So I bet you anything that stare, if that was really a Bigfoot, that stare was a stare to them saying, "Hey, I'm alpha, leave me alone."
Yeah, and see what's really cool. If you go back further in the videos I posted, I actually have some Bigfoot vocalizations I recorded from I think last year at that same property, and that was insane. This is going to sound really exaggerated, but my dad and I thought we were going to have to fight Bigfoots, not one but plural that night.
Yeah, so, a clan of the Bigfoot.
Yeah, and it was
survival instinct kicking in. It's like, man, you're getting a little scared. It's like, man, if they come and get us, we're gonna end up having to take cover and fight this place.
Yeah, we'll see. It was
out of here.
It was an interesting situation because we moved out of that house, that property in 2009. It's actually fall of 2009, and no one else was basically on the mountain. There were people because, we technically owned the whole mountain. And so we had a little neighborhood of houses and, stuff we oversaw. But up from about halfway the ridge up to the top, it was only our house. And so when we moved out, no one lived there for a few years. And then my aunt and uncle, they moved in there for a few years. And then there was a short period where they moved out. Well, that period where they moved out was about a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. And no one was up there. Hardly anyone basically disturbed halfway up the mountain up. And so there was all that wilderness, all those old trails, the deer, the wildlife basically took over. So my dad and I think it was last year, something like that. I'm pretty sure it was. We went up there because we were thinking about going back to that house. And so we spent the whole day cleaning it up. And it's just weird because I remember going up there with my grandfather, his brother, my dad, and it was just myself early in the morning. And you could feel something watching you from the woods the entire time. And it was, it was cloudy. It was storming periodically, raining. And you're circled on all sides by dense woods. And there's only like a piece of crap, gravel road that leads down the ridge. And it looks like a place out of a horror movie. And so we spent the whole day cleaning that up, the whole place up, hanging outside. And we kept mentioning to each other, hey, it feels like something's watching us. And there were times, it could have been the atmosphere messing with us, but we thought we saw stuff moving in the woods at certain times close to the house.
Well, that is a good possibility. You may have seen any of the type of forest creatures and the animals, like deer, or raccoons, or even bear. I'm sure they got bear down there too.
Oh yeah, we've seen a few, but it was interesting because there was no power to the house. They had cut the power. And so we were staying at a double wide. That was about maybe 300 yards. No, it was about 250 yards down the ridge. And it had just recently been put in there by my grandfather. And I actually helped build the thing. Pain in the butt. So we're staying there and, we're just chilling out. No one else is on the mountain. And I remember we were watching the X-Files because it's one of our favorite shows of all time. And my dad was like, hey, I'm going to go out, call your mom. Let her know we're coming back tomorrow and I'm going to go smoke. So we're sitting there and I've got the TV loud because sometimes, when I get tired, my hearing just doesn't work right when I'm tired. So I've got the volume turned up and all of a sudden there's it was like a ooh-ah, ooh-ah sound. And I heard it from outside and my dad comes running in. He's like, Jay, get the bleep out of here. And so we ran out. I was like, what? And you start getting that adrenaline, like, your heart's pumping, all that stuff. We run out there and he's like, did you hear that? And I'm like, what? He said, it sounded like a freaking monkey up the hill. And I was like, well, how far is it? About that time, we could hear something big moving in the brush line about 50 yards from us. And it sounded, bipedal, moving around. And at this point, we start hearing these howls. And if you've ever heard like like the Ohio Bigfoot yell by Matt Moneymaker 94, it sounded similar to that, only a bit more canine. And it was coming from close to where the house was up on the ridge. We could pinpoint exactly where it was, and it was echoing perfectly. And so we're sitting there we're looking at each other freaking out. And I'm like, holy crap, there's one up on the ridge. We knew what it was. And then we heard like grunting sounds coming from about 50 yards away. And we're like, holy crap, there's like two of them. And about the same time, we hear another howl from the other ridge across the creek. And so my dad and I are looking at each other. We're like, there's at least three of these things. And they're all kind of in like a triangle pattern. And they're calling out to each other and moving around. We heard what sounded like rocks being thrown at some point. I even saw one land at one point in our floodlights. And so I got the idea to pull out my iPhone and I started recording. And I have about a minute and a half of these ungodly sounds coming from the mountain. And, some were far, far off. Some were like, up at the house. And then there was one that was recorded that sounded like it was like almost right up on us. And we started seeing stuff moving around out of the corners of our eyes. And I caught a head-on view once of what looked like a tall person walking by this little pond that we have near the double wide, about 20 yards from us. And that's as close as they got. And at one point we were looking at each other, we're like, we might need to arm ourselves because they were getting closer. And this kept up for a long time, maybe like 5 or so minutes. But unfortunately, where I'd been taking a lot of photos and also where we were traveling, I didn't have enough space on my memory card and, that kind of cliche. But it continued for about 10 or so minutes. We would hear these howls. And, I've heard coyotes, I've heard bears, I've heard any animal possible up there. This did not sound like anything we had ever heard before. It was deep, guttural, and there was something almost canine to it, but also there was something kind of humanistic to it. Almost like, especially at the early deep growls, it almost sounded like when a person takes like a deep breath, you could hear that echo. And then for the rest of the night, we never heard anything.
Did you ever get the odor that people talk about when they have the Bigfoot experience?
I have never smelled anything whenever I've had experiences.
See, that's the part that's one of those parts that always gets me too. I mean, with as much water that's on this planet, and as big as those creatures are supposed to be, you think they'd get into the rivers and bathe and stuff like that too.
Well, I'm pretty sure they do.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that baffles me. But the rock throwing, and it's like, yeah, you're into my territory, get the hell out. And they're trying to spook you.
That probably would have been what it could have been, is them trying to intimidate you and get you out of there.
That's what we think it is too.
That always makes more sense than somebody saying they smell this rotten eggs odor.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. A lot of people say whenever they do have the smell from, that they feel that they smell from the Bigfoot when they have the experience, what they're smelling, they say what they smell is an odor like a wet fur, and like almost like a wet dog, but worse, like a wet dog being. Okay, here's a better example, like a wet dog that has been squirted by a skunk.
It's a good description.
So in all this and everything, have you ever taken any cameras up there, like motion sensor cameras or anything like that, and set them up? Just set them up like trail cams or something, and see if you could catch anything?
I haven't, because since we moved out of there in 2009, I've spent a little bit of time up there, and every time it was up there was something that needed to be done. And so my attention wasn't always on the paranormal Bigfoot. It was always on like fixing a road, or help repairing a barn, or do something fun like that. Visiting family. And that's what makes that stuff to me more interesting, because I would go up there to visit occasionally, and I wouldn't be looking for Bigfoot or ghosts or anything like that. I'd be focused on I haven't seen my family in years, hanging out. Yeah, and so, I'm spending all my time with people I haven't seen in years, and yet this stuff still happens. And, that's to me what makes it interesting.
You get stories from family members too, right?
Oh, heck yeah. Yeah, there was one of the trippiest things I've ever seen. There's a legend up on the ridge of this red-eyed shapeshifter. And, it's one of those stories that you always figure the old-timers kind of tell to scare kids or something like that. And one of the tenants that we had on the ridge, this is about 2014, 2015. I spent about a month with my aunt and uncle. And my aunt was pregnant, and so I was helping them out with a whole bunch of stuff that needed to be done. So I'm going down to, the tenants. And the guy, I don't remember his name. I remember their last name. They were really cool. It was a single guy and his daughter, son. Really cool people. And I remember one of them telling me, the daughter, she was like, you guys need to watch the trail. And I was like, well, what is it? And she's like, well, last night I saw this tall thing with red eyes walking. And it was just one of those, none of us had really heard of anything like that. And so I told my dad, and he actually recognized that creature because he remembers seeing something similar when he was young. A very tall, dark creature, not really Bigfoot, more of like a shadow person kind of thing. And so I started picking up my radar just a little bit more, and I started noticing some things were out of place. And so my uncle, we were worried about coyotes, attacking our puppies and stuff like that. So he actually set up a trail camera on an old logging road up on the ridge. And at one point, he was like, Jake, you need to see this. You need to see this. I think we got something. And so I get it. And there were a series of photos taken at about, I think it's like 2 o'clock in the morning. And the first photo, there's absolutely nothing. Second photo, you see something. It's like a dark shape, almost like a beach ball kind of thing. Not a perfect circle, but about that size. And it's literally on the ground. And it's like halfway in frame. The next photo, it's in the middle of the road. And there's like this weird kind of, like when you stare at pavement, you can see the heat waves rising off of it. It had like that effect.
Right.
And then 2 photos later, it's going down the ridge. And then next photo, it's gone. And I was like, holy crap, like I've never seen anything like that before. We, zoomed in, we were like, could it be this? Could it be that? And we couldn't debunk it. So I was like, well, here, I've got my laptop. I was like, just email me those photos and, I can clean them up and I can see what I can do. And also I can have an additional archive of them. So he tries to email them to me. And for some reason, it wouldn't send. It would say like error, unable to send or something like that. And so I got the camera, tried to put it into my laptop, and the entire camera card showed up as corrupted. Photo on it was gone.
Wow.
Yeah, it sounds like stuff that we had happen to us.
We went out to this state
Yeah, excuse
park
me for a second. He's going to tell you the story. I need to use the bathroom.
that had some very dark and rich Native American history to it, and we were getting all kinds of EMF readings and felt like we were being watched. Mark saw a couple of shadows down by the river, and the whole story, part of the story was this park and stuff was built on old Native American lands where this cannibalistic tribe lived back in the day. And then later there was a princess burial mound, and the legend has it that if you're standing on the princess burial mound, you'll see her, or you'll hear her shells. She had like 3 shell belts, so you'll hear them rattling.
Yeah.
Well, we were there and we were doing some filming. We were getting a lot of readings. Our EMF meter was going nuts on the one set of stairs because there's Indian burial mounds. Well, her remains were dug up in an archaeological dig, got sent to a Milwaukee museum, and to that day, that's where they are, in the basement of that museum.
Yeah.
And the Native American tribes that exist today have done protests to the museum to try to have her remains put back there. But when we got home from our first trip out to this park, and we went to look at all the footage and pull the footage out of the camera, the card was corrupt. And it was a brand new card.
Yeah.
Brand new card. And good batteries on the camera. Yeah, sorry about that. I had to use the can.
And we had
You're fine.
So we had a that was like one really strange experience that, and you can't, with the way things are nowadays and mass produced, well, it could have been just a corrupt card that got sent to us that way. So, I mean, we can't prove one way or the other how it got corrupt, but
true.
Right. Although the timing is pretty, coincidental.
But, yeah, it is
very
pretty coincidental. And the fact that we got so many hits on the meter and activity, and all of a sudden we get home and we're excited and nothing.
Yeah.
It really kind of burned us in the butt on that one. So we've been out there since then. We go back out and we didn't get anywhere near the same.
We didn't get the activity we did before, but we did walk a lot more when we were out there the second time around. And I swear to God, somebody was following us.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I actually seen a shadow behind me. And I stopped, turned around with the camera.
Yeah.
With it running. we both have cameras, so
right.
And I had my camera where I had it to where all I had to do is hit the button and it would start recording. So, but that was kind of strange too. But I didn't catch anything at that moment.
Yeah, it's just strange where you get 2 totally different stories and the same thing. You get a corrupt SD card.
Yeah, those yeah,
like that.
I don't know, those cards, they don't. A lot of them don't get corrupt that easily.
Yeah, and
so
when you can prove that it wasn't nothing with the weather because it was a clear day, and so it couldn't have gotten wet and any of that stuff. You can rule all that stuff out. It makes it kind of interesting to was it paranormal?
That's weird.
Yeah, it makes you think.
Yeah, Joe. see the private chat?
Yep. Yeah, I don't know what it. I've never had these connection issues before.
Yeah,
Oh.
that's.
So I'm gonna guess there's a spirit that does not want us talking.
Oh, look, it's Tanya. She popped in. That's Joe's wife.
Yeah, she's probably done with the kids. Who knows?
But yeah, we've done already. We've done 2 home investigations, and this last one that was up in Baraboo, Wisconsin, and I had an incident with the camera up there, and it was Joe's camera. We had it on the tripod. Finished up his interview with the person that we were there to do the investigation for, Tabitha, and I took the camera upstairs to the attic to set it up. I set it up. I have here. I have one of these. It's 10 feet long,
Right.
and I had an extension cord, and I could plug it in, so it didn't have to rely on the battery.
Yeah.
So I have it all plugged in. I have it set, ready to rock and roll and everything. And Tabitha's there in the room with me. She sees me reach down and push the button for record. So the camera's set. It's there. It's set to record.
Right.
So we have the lights out. We have it on night vision. So I walk out, close the little door, and we go back downstairs and do some more stuff down there. So when we're ready to leave and I go back upstairs, I was going to do an EVP as I walked into there, stand there for 5 or 10 minutes, whatever, with it still recording and do an EVP. I go in, I start the EVP, I go in, I turn, and I look at the camera, and it's turned off. The only thing that was on, the only light that was on was the charge light from it being plugged in.
Holy crap. I bet you were pissed.
Yes, I was.
And don't forget, somewhere around
and also
Tanya was feeling sick.
Right. And also, just before all that, I had my camera, and Joe's wife Tanya was recording with it, and I have we have a FLIR camera as well, and I was getting a weird hit on the FLIR. So I've
honestly never used the FLIR.
They're interesting. The ones we have they only take stills, and it gives you a readout of your temperature, and then it's got the little square viewfinder thing that will it's like a target thing. And if you don't have anything specific for it to actually target, it'll kind of jump around the screen. But what happened in one of the rooms, they have her Tabitha's boyfriend does things with Legos. He's got this big Lego collection. So I walked into the Lego room because of something that she had said earlier, and I was using the FLIR camera, and I got a weird reading on it, and then all of a sudden that target thing just stopped, dead stop right in the center, and it targeted on something that was there in front of me.
Yeah,
and I had no real differentials in temperature wise, so it wasn't showing any hot spots or cold spots really in the room, except for where that target was. It looked like there was a figure kind of standing there. So Joe's wife Tanya brings my camera in with the night vision on and was filming, trying to see if she'd catch anything. And then I put the EVP down, the voice recorder down, and was doing an EVP at the same time. So I took several pictures with the FLIR, and she was filming. Well, she wound up feeling ill, like bad energy came in. So she had to hand the camera off to me. So I put the FLIR down, and I kept filming and doing my EVP session, asking the questions. And I never seen anything really come up on the screen on the video camera, except for a little dot that some people would call dust, but there was no air movement in there. and it was the only one during the entire time
Wow,
that I was filming.
But
that's pretty
And
cool.
I haven't listened to the audio yet to see if there was any audio come off.
to make a note, that house and that area specifically has a lot of history, and that's what took us up there to begin with, because the person that's renting the house, Tabitha, was up in the attic and under the floorboard found a lot of treasures and papers dated back to the 1800s, when this family owned about 240 acres of farmland up there.
Oh wow, that's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
And not only that,
And then there's
part of the land,
death records, and little artifacts.
yeah, and I think there was some records of it showing that part of the land had the Ringling Brothers Circus
Right.
was located
Right.
on part of it as
Right.
well.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Barnum and his freaks were part of that. They had their they had their community on that land.
Right.
Yeah, so yeah, because right now the area up there at Baraboo, that's where the Circus World Museum is,
Right.
and that's
Yeah, there you
Yeah.
go. Yeah, she's
that's
the one
some
that
of the area there.
She was the one that was examining everything. The farm records were from 64 to 65 and 72 to 79.
Yeah, that was the farm records, but there was letters that there was a letter that Tab found that was dated 1906.
Right, and then there was
Oh, that's pretty cool.
And then there was some other documents and history and stuff that dated back into the late 1800s.
Yeah, and then also she had those newspapers. There were several newspapers that were dated around Kennedy's assassination.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot of direct connections to the people that dwelled in the house.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting to see all this.
And then while we were there, somebody else came around. One of her neighbors came by and was telling us about his house, which also sits on the same 240 acres.
Right.
So we're gonna end up making another trip there eventually. It sounds.
I'd say so.
Yeah, so it was really interesting to do.
But I'd still want to get into, I wish I lived in areas like you, because all the wooded areas.
That'd be
chances of running across them.
I'd have a lot of fun if I lived in the areas where he lives.
Oh, trust me, when it comes to like the cryptids, Bigfoot, and stuff like that, I have about 100 plans for investigations. It's just going out into the woods with a bunch of speakers and doing call blasting in the middle of the night. The neighbors, they kind of don't like that. You eventually hear about it. The authorities are called, so that's kind of why I've refrained from doing that.
Yeah.
Well, if you talk to the neighbors and everything around there, you possibly would be able to at some point. But I would actually, if I was in your position, having access of the areas up there and knowing what with the history of it, I would get a couple of trail cams, or borrow them from family members or something, and put them out. Just see what you can come up with. See, just. And maybe you're not going to go up there for specifically that, but take them with you.
Right.
Set them up. Go up there, visit family, see what, help the family out, whatever, but have those trail cams up and see if you can get anything.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
You never know. Because I'm the kind of person that I like to try and multitask.
Yeah, well, not everybody can multitask.
I know that, but I'm just saying, I figure
like that.
I like to try and if I can work something else in with something that I'm actually doing, I'll do it. So. Plus, when I do wind up catching stuff on video, I try to debunk it myself.
Oh, I do too. I think, that's the best way to approach any and all evidence, whether it's, potentially unexplained or easily debunkable.
Yeah, we did that on our first one.
Yeah, I did.
Last year.
I did that when we were out at the
Sanatorium Hill.
At the Sanatorium Hill. Someone else had a video up, and they were showing this figure walking across the parking lot area, and it's like That's just a person walking through there because there's a lot of foot traffic
It
at
was an
night
old TB
up there.
hospital.
Yeah.
It sits in Madison on the top of this great big huge hill that kids used to use for sledding down in the wintertime.
That sounds like fun.
Oh,
Minus the dark history, of course.
I grew up around that sanatorium, and the building itself is a spooky place, but it's been in use, and to this day it's still in use.
Yeah,
but,
to this day, it holds records, state records in it. And I actually talked with a guy who, a telephone repair guy, who has been in the basement of that building. And he said, you walk into the front door, you don't feel anything. You just, you're just there, you're doing your thing.
Right.
But they're relays for their phone systems in the basement. And he said, as soon as you go down the stairs and you walk through the threshold into the basement, you just, from head to toe, you get this just eerie, somebody is standing there breathing down your neck feeling.
Yeah.
And I'm like, damn, I want to get my ass down there with a camera.
Yeah, there's been a few stories about that basement.
Oh yeah,
that I've heard.
I'm one of the people too that I don't have a flight response because of everything that I have experienced over my lifetime. I don't have that flight response. I don't spook. If I feel somebody's screwing with me, I'll keep at whatever I'm doing to prove that someone's screwing with me. But if it's something that people are unexplainable to, it doesn't bother me. It won't make me run.
I mean, I would like to say that I don't have a flight response, but I know me, and I know, whenever something crazy would happen, I'd immediately go into a flight response.
Because survival instinct sets in.
Yeah, but see, I'm very fortunate. There have only been, I can think off the top of my head, 2 occasions during my investigations where I have been utterly terrified. The first one would be St. Albans Sanatorium, my experience with this blob creature, lost time, and a whole bunch of other chicanery that, I still had no explanation for.
Hi, Molly. Sorry.
And then the second time would probably be, it would probably be in the same building. I had another experience with another entity, which, I could do a full 1.5, 2-hour long show on St. Albans and the crap I've dealt with there, because that's, every sanatorium has its dark element. For me, that place just seeps dark everywhere. The energy just.
Well, that's kind of how Sanatorium Hill here in Madison is like. It's you look at the building and it's just. But everything that is known about that place is the basement area, because that was set up. It was a TB hospital.
Yeah.
So, and what they did is they had the whole area behind it where is now a park and it's full of trees. They had swimming pools set up in there. They had a pig farm that's further back that they had set up. They had other different activities and stuff for the tuberculosis patients. Right. And from the basement of the building, they actually had a tunnel system that you could take a tunnel and go all the way out to the pig farm, and then you'd come up into one of the small buildings, and there you are. You're at the pig farm. Yeah. So they didn't have to take everybody, they didn't have to take everybody outside to get them to where they were going. And the same way with the pools, therapy pools, take the tunnel, there you are, you're at the pool, and stuff like that. So that's kind of what a lot of people are saying about this is that tunnel system, the basement itself, is where all the bad energy, all the bad juju has kind of like settled. That's why I want to get down there with a camera. I don't care about the other floors and the records. I want to get down there with the camera.
I don't think I've ever heard of a good story coming from a sanatorium's basement. I think all basements and sanatoriums are just inherently evil.
Now, one of the things I was going to ask you about, though, you said the one that you were talking about, St.
St. Albans Sanatorium in Radford, Virginia. Yeah,
Okay.
scariest place I've ever been to. So
Okay.
far.
Now you said you experienced time loss.
Time loss. My dad and I both. We were there on April 2nd, 2016. My very first time there. Great investigation. It was a public event. There was a bunch of people there. But in the days and weeks after, there was just this obsession with it. And, I kept hearing voices in my head saying, you need to go back. You need to go back. Go back to Albans. And I've talked to several other investigators, that have been there frequently, and they say the same thing. It's like the building calls you. And
once you're there, the building hooks you and it calls you back.
And, I got to the point to where on May 13, 2016, it's an awesome place. I had 2 military ceremonies at my military school, our closing ones. I actually skipped the last military ceremony just so I could go to the Friday the 13th event. I was that obsessed with it. And
that is so cool.
We went there, and I just remember, because you go across this bridge over the New River, and it's sitting up on the ridge, and it was cloudy days. It looked like something out of a horror movie. And I just remember the building, for some reason, looked evil. And, the first time I was there, I was like, oh, cool, there's a bucket list location. I've always wanted to go here. And so the first time I was there, it was pure excitement. I was like a kid in the candy store, which is a weird way to describe going into a sanatorium. But the second time, it was different. There was a dark tone. And, within a few minutes, we were in the basement, speaking of basements, and one of the creatures there allegedly is this goat man creature. And I remember there was like this sense of rage and aggression that came over me, and I actually ended up calling out the goat man creature. I had been seeing this thing moving out of the corner of my eye, and I had my original voice cry. I had it out in front of me, and, I just flipped, and I was like, whatever you are, I said, stay freaking still. I probably didn't say freaking, though. I said, I'm coming back there. And so I'm walking back there, and I got this smell of like wet fur is what it smelled like. And I just remember still going headstrong and honest, that the voice recorder outstretched in front of me, and there's just this loud hissing sound, and it sounded just like a goat hiss. And
wow.
It freaked me. I remember stopping in my tracks, and I kind of came back, to earth there for a second. And I was very thankful that when I was reviewing the audio, the hiss was plain as day, where, it was right in front of me in this corner. I was about 2 feet from the corner. The voice recorder had to have been a foot away from the thing. So later,
St. Albans?
Yes, in Radford, Virginia.
What's this place right here?
Yep, that's it. That's actually my photo. Yeah.
Yes, I found it on your site.
Yeah, that's the creep. If you look in the very bottom left, underground, and then about halfway back is where the basement is. But this building that you see on screen right here, that second floor, that second level, is known as Demon Hallway, and it's known that for a reason.
Wow.
That styling is Victorian style.
It was designed 1892. I forget the guy's name, but it was heavily influenced by some of the universities in the area, which all kind of get from the Victorian style of architecture, some of the Greek university stuff like that.
Yep. Madison's the same way.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, doesn't that kind of look like the backside once you get up the hill and you get to the parking lot?
Kind of, yeah.
Sanatorium Hill.
Sanatorium Hill, a little bit, yeah. So yeah, we have similar building styles here because of the years that they were built. In fact, there's a cemetery right next to Sanatorium Hill in the back of this church that you can see from the Northport Drive.
Yeah.
And this cemetery has graves there from the 1800s.
Oh wow.
Yeah, we were up in there filming some of that too, and a lot of them are there's an entire family. There's an entire family of like 4 or 5 children that had died within, I think it was like 3 years of each other.
Holy crap!
Yeah, and they weren't. I think the oldest one. I think the oldest one in that area was in that particular spot was 8 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty screwed up, man. But it's a really interesting cemetery and a really interesting area up there.
Yeah, but yeah, the thing with Albans, I just remember that night, there was one point I overheard some of the volunteers, and there was this lady who was, like doubled over and all that stuff in the break room. And I just kept hearing people say, yeah, she got punched by something, she got hit by something. And then there was someone else who got scratched, someone else saw something with red eyes, and there was just darkness everywhere. And so at about 12 o'clock, the last rotation, because you did it in 45-minute rotation, I think there was like 5 rotations or something like that, 4 or 5. And we went up to that second floor where I was telling you about. There's this place called Jacob's Room. Everyone always jokes at me because my name's Jacob and stuff like that. But we were in the room with 2 other people. One was actually a former Marine. And we started hearing these growls. And they weren't coming. It was weird because they weren't coming from the room. They felt like they were coming from the walls. And on the voice recorder, you could hear us reacting, all of us describing the same thing, but the voice recorder picks up nothing. And then at another point, we were all hearing, I still remember it vividly. It sounded like stuff was being thrown in the room across from it. We could hear glass shattering, people stomping around. And you could hear us on the recording going like, what is that? What the heck? And stuff like that. Nothing on the recorder.
But you nothing on the recorder, and you didn't find anything.
Nothing.
Like
nothing was moved.
Freshly broken.
No, nothing. It was a completely empty room aside from like a bed and
a lot of that could have been residual.
That's what we're thinking. So the guy comes in, the tour guide. He's like, "We've been looking for you. Where are you?" And we were like, "What do you mean you've been looking for us? We've been here." And the thing about the building, it's very echoey. So even if someone's like 3 rooms away, you can hear them. So the guy takes us out of the room, and he looks like, he's freaking out. And this is a guy, I've known him for years. He's a very calm, cool, too cool for school kind of guy. Never gets scared by this stuff. And he looked freaked out. And so we see that everyone is at the bottom of the stairs, because next to Jacob's room, there's main stairwell. And there's like 20 people gathered, but they never heard us, and we never heard them. And we're like, that's a little odd. So the last thing I remember is talking to that guide as we're walking down the stairs. And then the next thing I remember is my dad and I are back in that second floor hallway in a back room we had never been before. And I'm looking at newspaper clippings that are, taped to the wall. And it was weird. I had a camera on me at the time, and I was rolling on it. And then I shut the camera, and we were about to go join the rest of the group. We don't even remember how we got there. And on our voice recorder, we had the voice recorder running. At no point in the recording does it say, hey, we're going to go to this room. It just kind of cuts from us going downstairs to us halfway down the hallway in this room we had never been before. So how we got there, we don't know. But I remember looking out of the corner of my eye, and I just saw this thing move quickly into the doorway. And the best way I can describe it is almost like a blob. And it was taller than the door frame, almost as tall as the ceiling. And the ceiling was maybe like 8 feet, something like that. So this thing's about 7.5 feet tall. And I just remember going like, holy, blank. And I ignored every instinct. It was like I lost complete control of myself because I chased after it. And my dad is like, what? Because, he doesn't know what's going on. This is all happening in the blink of an eye. So the thing takes off and it glides. It's like this creep. I can see it in my mind now. It's like this creepy glide, like it's on wheels going through the hall. And I'm just like full speed running. I've got the voice recorder in my hand. I've got, the spirit box. I'm just taking off after it. And then it stops in the middle of the hallway. And it does like this basketball pivot. And it faces me, and I stop, dead in my tracks, literally about 3 feet away from this thing. And it's just this tall, dark figure. But I remember inside its body, it looked like almost like black hole swirls or like galaxy swirls or something like that in its body. And it was radiating this heat off of it. Not a bad smell or anything like that. Just heat, pure heat was coming off of it. And, my dad came running. He was like, and I was like, the heck is this? And I just remember it had like this crooked looking smile that kind of favored the right side. It extended higher up on its face than its left side. And we slowly backed up into the room, and things started coming after us. And, we got the spirit box out. Still to this day, those are the clearest spirit box responses I've ever had. And we had a full-on conversation with this thing for about 6 minutes on the voice recorder. And at this point, we're starting to get the sense, because the thing is literally coming into the room, and we keep backing up. We're starting to be backed into a corner in the original room we were in. So, we look at each other. My dad's like, we need to get out of here for our safety, because we literally had that feeling that, we're completely helpless and this thing has pure aggression and just rage was coming off of it. So we ended up going through this sideway by it. And I remember going through the hallway and just seeing it like glide slowly towards us. So we get to the rest of the group and, I was freaked out, but I remember I was like, hey, sorry we were gone, because when the guide originally came and got us, we were going back to the safe room to end the thing, because he was like, hey, we have to leave in like 2 minutes. So in my mind, I'm like, this whole thing took place in like 2 minutes. So, we look at our voice recorder and the voice recorder says we had been rolling for 13 minutes.
Wow.
And yet the guide said we had only been gone for about a minute and a half. And we don't remember how we got there. Because
there you have the time loss.
About 13 to 14.
Actually, what you experienced is something that I call a long second.
Oh.
I've actually had that happen to me, where, I used to wear a watch, and it used to have a regular watch with a second hand on it.
Yeah.
And I've actually looked down at my watch to see what time it was and watched the second hand. I swear it took like 30 seconds for it to just do one click.
Yeah.
Basically a long second.
Mm-hmm.
And that's I've heard that explained as time dilation whenever that people can't experience whenever there are types of spirits in the area.
Yeah. Well, thankfully, that's the only time I've had that happen, because it was a surreal feeling, because even though, we knew people were around the corner, down the stairs and all that stuff, we felt like we were in our own little world and like just cut off from everything. We couldn't hear, because like I said, the place is echoey. You can hear 20 people laughing, cutting up, halfway down the hall. We couldn't hear anyone, and they couldn't hear us. And all of the stuff that had happened, they couldn't hear us running. They couldn't, no footsteps, nothing.
Cool. So that recording and everything that you're talking about, that's on that one that you have.
Well, the recording of the blob incident, one of the things about kind of like the other noises we heard, its voice never, it never stayed on tape. It erased itself. You can hear us respond to answers coming over the spirit box, but you basically hear us ask a question, and then you hear, silence, and then you hear, hey, did it just say this? But there's nothing. You never hear anything off there.
I was just kind of curious, because I noticed you do have a bunch of postings from St. Albans.
Oh yeah, St. Albans. I've been there 6 times I can remember off the top of my head, and every time I've been there, it's been insanely active.
Cool.
It's the only location I have ever seen demonic entities with my own eyes, and that's only happened 3 times there.
See, now you got me intrigued. I'd love to go there.
It's a mess. It'll catch you off guard. You'll be in one room.
I don't know if they catch me off guard.
Yeah, it goes from 0 to like 1 million instantly. You go from energies, flat line, nothing crazy going on, to all of a sudden you feel like you're in the war zone and like everything's going wrong.
I feel like that every day.
That does sound interesting, though.
That does sound like a very interesting place.
And I definitely wouldn't have the flight response in a place like that either.
I don't know.
I think
I'd place a bet.
I have not ever ran across anything yet in my experience in life.
Keyword.
That has truly made me feel like I had to get away from it.
I mean, you better knock on wood.
I mean, shit, when I was 8 years old, I watched a freaking UFO come moving in across the San Joaquin Valley. My dad at the time had a 50-foot CB antenna on top of the house, and this thing totally missed it.
Yeah.
And when it got over the house, it was basically the size or bigger of the house.
Holy crap.
And it went right over top of that antenna and totally missed it. And my mom and I watched it from the back of the house, watched it come in and go over. And then we went to the front of the house and watched it disappear off into the mountains.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
I got another question to ask you.
Uh-huh.
Because I did my research and my homework on you a little bit beforehand, because I do know, and for those that don't know, according to what I read, your father and son team, we've already kind of established that because you've mentioned you've been on these adventures with your dad a lot, but Ed Warren, you actually talked to this guy?
Not Ed Warren, Lorraine Warren. Yeah,
Lorraine
Ed Warren
Warren?
unfortunately passed in 2006.
Okay. About Annabelle.
Annabelle, I have seen Annabelle. That's
What
just
was
one of
that
those
like?
things. It's almost like seeing, a celebrity or something like that, because it's so hyped up. You hear so much about it. And then when, you enter the Warren's Occult Museum, you turn that little corner by Ed's paintings and the Conjuring Mirror, and then the White Lady, the witch, I don't remember her name. And then you see Annabelle in the case.
Right.
And there's just, I think it's because, you instantly remember the stories of the doll, the Warren's case, but you instantly give it that energy. You give it that attention. You're like, wow, this is the doll that did this. This is the doll that did that. And so, you kind of put it up on this pedestal before you give it a chance to do your own interpretation of it. But I just remember it was the coolest thing walking up to it, inches away from it, and just looking at it in its eyes and knowing that, in the 1970s, this doll caused so much stress and chaos for these nursing students and their friend, who I still feel bad for whenever you read that case. And then, allegedly killed a guy who challenged it and stuff like that. And there was actually one moment where I was taking video of the doll and my camera, for some reason, wouldn't focus on it. So I turned my camera off. Mind you, at this time, I'm 13 years old, and I'm cleaning the camera off. Right. And one of the people that's next to me taking photos of me, he's taking it not of me, but of the doll. He's like, hey, look at that. And I looked at it, and you can see on the right side of the doll, it looks like its hair is flowing just a little bit, almost as if there's wind inside the case, which,
but it's locked tight in this case.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's an airtight case.
It's locked tight in the case where it's like a sign, do not touch, do not remove.
Yeah. There's there's the sign that says warning, positively do not touch, and it's got an extra exclamation point. And I remember Lorraine told us, if you see anything, hear anything, or feel anything, there's this guy Father Bill who had performed many exorcisms with the Warrens, had consulted with them on many cases, and she's like, go tell him, basically. And so I remember going to the back by the doors, and you're saying, hey, Father Bill, I just saw this. And he was like, what? He was like, well, describe it perfectly. I was like, I told him what I had just seen. And he was like, only a few people have seen that doll move. And he was like, you need to watch yourself and be careful. Not just now, but always. And he kind of left me with that cryptic message. And, I was like, thanks.
So during your time in there near the doll and everything, did you feel any kind of energies coming off the doll?
You could feel something coming off of the doll. There were a lot of objects there that you could feel stuff coming off of. But looking back on it now, I wonder if a lot of that was because, all this stuff is always hyped up.
Right.
And so you kind of expect it. Right. It's like, someone tells you this place is haunted. You see shadow people, you hear voices. So when you go into that place, you expect shadow people and voices because, you've had 50 people tell you that's what it is. And so I think, because I do remember looking at a lot of the objects, like the Conjuring Mirror. The scariest thing in that whole museum is not Annabelle, the Conjuring Mirror. It's this freaking demon statue that was from Newtown, Connecticut. And the thing's like 6'4", and it's not behind any rails or anything. It's just, next to a wall that you have to walk by. And it's creepy look. It is the scariest man-made thing I have seen in my life. And the energy that came off of that was worse than Annabelle or anything like that. Wow. Just blue eyes, and it's staring right at you. And I just remember that really freaked me out because I had never heard of that object before. It was some satanic group in Newtown was doing a bunch of crazy rituals, and the Warrens, and I forget how they ended up with the statue, but it was basically that they ended up with it. And so, I feel like that reaction to it was genuine because going in, I didn't know that thing existed. I didn't know.
Right.
So when I had those feelings coming from that statue, I feel it was legit. And that doesn't mean that the feelings or impressions I got from Annabelle or anything like that wasn't legit. It's just I think it could have been muddied because you go into there with an expectation.
Right, because it's like, meeting a celebrity for the first time, you're kind of starstruck.
Yeah, exactly.
Because Annabelle is a pretty famous doll. I mean, it's been on I don't know how many different paranormal shows, unexplained shows.
They have recently made a couple of movies about it too.
Yeah. Right. Now, when I went, they had the only movie that had been out was The Conjuring. That was the only movie that had been out at this point. But see, we're in Lorraine Warren. They're my heroes. I've read pretty much all their cases online. I've read a few of their books. So, I knew the case like the back of my hand going in. And that whole experience was the coolest thing in the world to me because, not only do you get to see Lorraine, but she actually ended up staying behind with my dad and I and her son-in-law, Tony Spera, for about 45 minutes after the event and just talked with us. And, she is the kindest person I've ever met, very friendly, funny too. And I just remember, before we were leaving, she was, she gave me a big hug and she was like, just remember, never do anything that you wouldn't normally do with a clear mind. And I said, well, I want to do this forever. I'm like, this is what I feel led to do. And I said, do you have any advice for, how I can be the best investigator and help people? And, what she told me, I'll never forget. She said, no matter what you do, whether it's a case, a regular investigation, or anything in life, always go into it with the best intentions and everything will work out fine. And that was, that was the last thing that she told me. And it just always stuck with me.
Sounds like some good advice.
It is good advice.
That and keeping an open mind always helps.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That's what I tell other people. When you get into this, you want to keep an open mind because you can't go into it with a closed mind. And you can't go into it always expecting to find something either.
Yeah,
that's true.
You're going to be in for a lot of disappointments if you think you're
regardless
going to find everything or something every time you go out.
But that's one of the things about the paranormal. I have to interrupt. Is everyone thinks they hear these stories on shows like this, and they're like, oh, every time you go out, they have something crazy and scary happen. It's like, no, for every cool story that we might have, there's 8 or 9 hours of sitting in the dark, basically talking to thin air, nothing happening.
Right. And finding nothing. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Well, like me, for instance, I don't really like the Ghost Adventures guys. Not trying to be an ass or anything like that to say anything bad about them. It's just I personally feel that a lot of their stuff is staged.
Well, it is. A lot of those shows on TV are scripted and staged, or it's clipped out of the best footage out of probably several hundred hours of footage that they've got, and then they make it like it all happened in one day when it was probably, happened over several weeks and periods, and we don't see that, different time frame because
that's possible too. But the ones I thought were the most authentic are the ones that you mentioned, Jake, was Jay and Grant.
Jay and Grant and Josh Gates. Josh Gates is my favorite.
I love Josh. Josh is awesome.
Josh Gates is somebody that's just too real to be scripted.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, his shows are scripted because they take it out, but he tells it like it is. I think some of these guys do it for the money, kind of like Matt Moneymaker and his group. I'm not a big fan of theirs. I mean, their show is more for entertainment purposes, I think, when they're going out and finding Bigfoot. I mean, Bobo's got to be the biggest joke of that group. Bigfoot eats what I eat. How do you know? Have you ever met Bigfoot yet? That's the kind of thing I think of. Did you ever actually ask him what his favorite meals were?
Yeah, I'm not trying to offend you, Jake. It's just Because I know you mentioned Moneymaker
They
at the beginning and stuff too.
they quickly determine that everything that somebody's seen is Bigfoot, when we all know, and common sense will tell you that sometimes if you're not from the area or not familiar with the area, misidentification takes a big role in a lot of it. We all know this. You know, that's why I'm fascinated with a thing called Beast of Bray Road. It's kind of like the Dog Man of Wisconsin or Michigan. Or
I will not deal with dogmen. They're evil to me. There's just something about dogmen and reports of dogmen, descriptions of them that just, there's certain things that certain people just screams heck no, or just like pure evil. That's one of those things for me. I will never investigate a dogman sighting.
I'm just fascinated with the story and the werewolves and stuff like that. Well, if you've seen my dog, you'd understand why. Well, I got a purebred Siberian Husky, the closest thing you can get to a wolf, without actually having one.
The Beast of Bray Road, I think that's one of the most legitimate encounters or cases of an unidentified creature that exists in recorded record. If you look at all the years of sightings, all the credible witnesses,
it dates back to the 1930s.
And then, you have the tracks that have been casted there. And, not just 1930s. This is going back to that region, back into like the 1870s and with the original settlers. Right. I don't think it was Beast of Bray Road, but there was something in Michigan that I'm trying to remember the name of the village, but it was the mid to early 1800s, where there was some settlers that had recently moved in, and they had reported that a lot of people in town, mainly young children, were being taken by these, overly aggressive wolves, and that occasionally the wolves would, hide themselves behind trees, like, bipedally or something like that, and occasionally they would walk on their back legs, and that's those stories that they're kind of glossed over, but you could take that as the very first descriptions of dogmen.
Right. Now, did you know that the hyena, which is an indigenous species of Africa, it can stand and walk on its hind legs?
And so can wolves. I've seen photographs of wolves that have been
and hyenas actually do this. There are recorded incidences where hyenas have done this in the towns and attacked people by doing this.
Yeah.
So it is kind of interesting to know that a animal of that nature can actually do something like that.
So where can people find you and see your videos? And I guess it's getting about that time to wrap it up. We've been online for about an hour.
A little over
an hour. But
if people are interested,
what happens when things go good?
Yeah. They can go to www.facebook.com/Fife Paranormal. You can find us there. That's where we basically post all of our stuff. You can also find us on Instagram at Fife Paranormal on Instagram. Pretty original name for that. You can also find us on www.youtube.com/Fife Paranormal. We try to post 1 to 2 videos per week. I need to get it to a bit more consistent schedule of uploads, but we typically have 1 to 2 videos a week. Next week, I have some very special videos planned. I can't give the details on that, but it's going to be an interesting week next week.
No, we'll have to tune in and watch for that one next week.
Definitely. Well, Jake, it was
really
nice
good talking
with
to you. Hope you come back on again in the future.
I'd love to be on. Thank you all once again for inviting me on. This has been a lot of fun. It is a huge honor.
Well, no, I thank you for coming on and telling us your stories, because, man,
it was interesting.
I love listening to stuff like that and seeing the different aspects of videos and stuff that people do.
Man, it's great to get other people's approaches and opinions to your experiences, your theories, and stuff like that. It kind of broadens your horizons when it comes to how you approach this field.
Exactly.
Oh, definitely.
Oh, and for all you that watch us, just remember www.utterlyinsaneproductions.com, and we'll see you next week.
Well, thanks, Jake.
Thank you.
Well, thank y'all for having me on. Y'all have a good night.
You too.
Yeah, you too.